those kindred were up the St. John's. It was very natural that the men from that region should feel thus bitterly, but it shows how much of a habit of soldiers they have all acquired, that the South Carolina men, who were leaving the neighborhood of their families for an indefinite time, were just as eager to go, and not one deserted, though they knew of it for a week beforehand. No doubt my precarious health makes it now easier for me personally to remain here, easier on reflection at least, than for the others. At the same time, Florida is fascinating, and offers not only adventure, but the command of a brigade. Certainly, at the last moment, there was not a sacrifice I would not have made rather than wrench myself and the others away from the expedition. We are, of course, thrown back into the old uncertainty, and if the smallpox subsides, and it is really diminishing decidedly, we may yet come in at the wrong end of the Florida affair. February 19. Not a bit of it. This morning the General had ridden up radiant, has seen General Gillmore, who has decided not to order us to Florida at all, nor withdraw any of this garrison. Moreover, he says that all which is intended in Florida is done, that there will be no advance to Tallahassee, and General Seymour will establish a camp of instruction in Jacksonville. Well, if that is all, it is a lucky escape. We little dreamed that on that very day the march toward Olustee was beginning. The battle took place next day, and I add one more extract to show how the news reached Beaufort. February 23, 1864. There was the sound of revelry by night at a ball in Beaufort last night, in a new large building beautifully decorated. All of the collected flags of the garrison hung round and over us, as if the stars and stripes were devised for an ornament alone. The array of uniforms was such that a civilian became a distinguished object, much more a lady. All would have gone according to the proverbial marriage bell, I suppose, had there not been a slight, palpable shadow over all of us from hearing vague stories of a lost battle in Florida, and from the thought that perhaps the very ambulances in which we rode to the ball were ours only until the wounded or the dead might tenant them. General Gillmore only came, I supposed, to put a good face upon the matter. He went away soon, and General Saxton went. Then came a rumor that the Cosmopolitan had actually arrived with wounded, but still the dance went on. There was nothing unfeeling about it. One gets used to things, when suddenly in the midst of the lancers there came a perfect hush. The music ceasing, a few surgeons went hastily to and fro, as if conscience-stricken. I should think they might have been. Then there waved a mighty shadow in, as in Newland's Black Night, and as we all stood wondering, we were aware of General Saxton, who strode hastily down the hall, his pale face very resolute, and looking almost sick with anxiety. He had just been on board the steamer. There were 250 wounded men just arrived, and the ball must end. Not that there was anything for us to do, but the revel was mistimed, and must be ended. It was wicked to be dancing, with such a scene of suffering near by. Of course the ball was instantly broken up, though with some murmurings and some longings of appetite on the part of some towards the wasted supper. Later I went on board the boat. Among the long lines of wounded, black and white intermingled, there was the wonderful quiet which usually prevails on such occasions. Not a sob, nor a groan, except from those undergoing removal. It is not self-control, but chiefly the shock to the system produced by severe wounds, especially gunshot wounds, and which usually keeps the patient stiller at first than at any time later. A company from my regiment waited on the wharf in their accustomed dusky silence, and I longed to ask them what they thought of our Florida disappointment now. In view of what they saw, did they still wish we had been there? I confess that in the presence of all that human suffering, I could not wish it, but I would not have suggested any such thought to them. I found our kind-hearted ladies, Mrs. Chamberlain and Mrs. Dewhurst, on board the steamer, but there was nothing for them to do, and we walked back to the camp in the radiant moonlight. Mrs. Chamberlain, more than ever strengthened in her blushing woman's philosophy, I don't care who wins the laurels, provided we don't. February 29. But for a few trivial cases of varioloid, we should certainly have been in that disastrous fight. We were confidently expected for several days at Jacksonville, and the commanding general told Colonel Hallowell that we, being the oldest colored regiment, would have the right of the line. This was certainly to miss danger and glory very closely. End of Chapter 11. Recording by FNH. Visit www.bookranger.co.uk.